We want to continue on. Looks like I'm missing a repeat in that. Am I right? That should be doubled on the bottom too, shouldn't it? You kidding? Leave me alone. The note. It's not the case the last one she told me about. But we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2 here this afternoon. It looks like I have no review, so we'll go right to it. Oh, you I do have. I do have a little review here. And I took away still left all of them. So it's time for a rest. Verse 1, let me read it again. Let us therefore fear lest the promise being left us entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. And from last time, which was about a month ago, if I'm not mistaken, we have the time for rest, the fear, the freedom, the failure. What do people fear today? May we fear this in contrast to all the other things that we fear today. And the freedom of promise being left to us. What a freedom that we do have, but yet the failure that they lived out, and they fell short. They came short of it. Now we come to verse 2, which is what we want to look at here this afternoon. It says, for unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. I give these illustrations not because I'm an expert in this degree, but because I know this to be true, because I have done a share of this. But in cooking, isn't it amazing how if you leave out we'll call it a minor ingredient, how different the outcome can be. For instance, chocolate cookies, something I made quite frequently in high school. We had visitation every Saturday morning for the teens, and I think I made 100 cookies every week, it seems like. And somehow the teens would demolish 100 cookies every week. And I'd make those cookies, and I don't remember, what, 3 cups of flour and like a cup and a half or something, 3/4 of a cup of sugar and 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, and it's like a tablespoon of vanilla, and obviously chocolate chips, got to be an important ingredient there, and baking soda if I'm not mistaken. But one thing that if you leave out, what is it, like a teaspoon of salt. If you forget the salt, although, you've got 3 cups of flour, and then you got a cup and a half total of sugar, but you forget that teaspoon of salt. So small compared to this big bowl full of all the other ingredients. And left off the eggs. Throw some eggs in there as well. But you forget the salt. Makes a difference. And there's probably every recipe has that, those things that you consider so insignificant that you just a pinch of this or a pinch of that, but you forget it. Makes a huge difference. And I've learned that over the years, and I say over the years, but I learned that in my earlier years, and then my wife has taken over the cooking ever since, so that's beneficial to me. But as well, what I've also learned through life is that a lot of times there's in fact, I think my mom had a cookbook that had all these, what would you call that, replacements, what do you call it? Substitutions. Yeah, so if it calls for this, you don't have that, you can substitute with this. And some people take that to the extreme and take out something that's really important and remove something that I would dare say would be not important. Going back to my vegetable thing, you take out this and put in vegetable. Well, you ruined it. That's not a substitute. That's a destruction. That doesn't work. And what I have also been amazed at over the years, and I'm saying this tongue in cheek again. It's funny that both of my messages today start with food. I must be hungry. I must have been really hungry on Friday when I'm working on this preparation. Is that how many times I've heard, well, I made this and I replaced something or other, but it tastes even better, or you won't even notice the difference. That's what often you won't even notice the difference. And I scratch my head and I think, if this was supposed to have beef and now it has soy, I'm going to notice the difference. This was supposed to have sugar and now it has something else. I'm going to notice that there is a difference. And there's been a few times throughout my existence that I've been fed that, can I just say lying? I've been fed that. Well, you won't even know. We took out this thing that is, the crucial ingredient that is what you're looking for. And we replace it with this, but you won't notice the difference. Now here's some chocolate pudding, but we took out the chocolate, and it's replaced with Yes, and it's something else. And you won't even notice the difference. And I take my first bite and I think it's been a long time since you've had the real thing, hasn't it? If you think that is the same, it's been quite some time. Well, in this verse, we have the very reality that this was not a minor ingredient that was left out. It was obviously one of the crucial ingredients that was left out. But everything else seems to be going right along as it should. But they neglected one thing, and it made all the difference. And we want to look at the kind of, I don't know what I'm going to call it, what's the difference? And how oftentimes we can say that in our deception. What's the difference? You won't notice the difference. Now, I will say that there are times that people like things better. The way they taste differently. You replace this with something else and people like it better that way. I won't argue that because it's what you like and everybody has different tastes. But to say that you won't notice the difference is maybe going too far. But notice the similarities here in verse 2. It says, "For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them." When it talks about the them, we're going back to the Old Testament, going back to the children of Israel. We're going to even more specifically to the time of Moses, which we talked about a lot in chapter 3. And so we're going back to the nation of Israel and their time of Moses and the time of the Exodus. And it says there in verse 2, "For unto us," written to the readership of Hebrews, which would be mostly believing Jews, and some I think are on the fence here as far as just kind of interpreting that from some of the passages that we will be getting to here in Hebrews. But it seems like for the most part, most of them are believing Jews. Some of them seem to be on the fence, maybe haven't fully accepted Christ for who he is, but they at least understand the gospel at this point. So he says, "For unto us is the gospel preached, but also unto them was the gospel preached." If you want to hold your finger here in Hebrews 4, otherwise I'll just read these verses. But in Exodus chapter 19, we have, of sorts, the gospel that was presented to them. Now, when we consider the gospel, we consider the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, as Paul describes it there in, I believe, 1 Corinthians. But obviously, we're well before the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Obviously, many of the prophets later would prophesy in that regard. But notice what is preached here in Exodus chapter 19, beginning in verse 3. "And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself." Now, let's just stop right there. Can you imagine what it was like to be the children of Israel, finally leaving the captivity of Egypt, and getting to the borders of the water and seeing the approaching armies coming behind you and an impossibility ahead of you? And literally what it says here, "How I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself." A child, an adult, male and female, cannot miss the point that God did many amazing things for them in the Exodus. Continues on verse 5. "Now therefore, because what you've already seen me do, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me before all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." Moses, here's what I want you, I need you to tell them. Remind them what I have done for them to this point. And remind them that they need to obey me because of what they've seen me do before them already. Remind them that they need to obey me now. And all that I tell them from this point forward, they need to follow, they need to adhere to. Moses, you need to tell them this. And he concludes there in verse 6, "Make sure you tell the children of Israel exactly as I told you." If we jump ahead, let me jump quite a bit ahead. To Exodus chapter 23. Exodus 23 and verse 20. This is the last one to get right here. Here we go. Exodus 23 verse 20 says this. Behold, in the right spot. Behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee unto the place where I have prepared. Beware of him and obey his voice. Provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if thou shalt indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy unto thine enemies, and an adversary unto thine adversaries. For mine angel shall go before thee, and bring thee into the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. Just stop me right there. What is God saying to them right here? Kind of continuation of what he's already addressed to them in chapter 19. In essence, you need to obey me. You need to trust me. You need to do as I have told you to do. And if you will do that, if you will trust me, here's what I will do for you. And he begins to list off these entire nations. I will cut them off for you. It's an amazing reality of what God is saying. Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. And you shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee. What an amazing promise is here. There shall nothing cast their young, nor be barren in thy land. The number of thy days I will fulfill. I will send my fear before thee, and will destroy all the people to whom thou shalt come. And I will make all thine enemies turn their backs unto thee. Now, it's kind of when we think about turning our backs, we think it's a negative way, but when it involves your enemies turning your backs, they have that idea they are running from you. I will make your enemies run from you. And I will send hornets before thee, which shall drive out the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Hittites from before thee. And I will not drive them out from before thee in 1 year, lest the land become desolate, and the beasts in the field multiply against thee. By little and little I will drive them out from before thee, until thou be increased and inherit the land. As you grow, I will send them away. Verse 31, and I will set thy bounds from the Red Sea, even unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the desert unto the river. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and thou shalt drive them out before thee. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make thee sin against me. For if thou serve their gods, it will surely be a snare unto thee. There's so many other passages that we can go to there in Exodus, but ultimately, what were they being challenged to do? God is telling them, hey, you've lived this out. You've seen this. I have done great and mighty things for you in the past, and I am making even greater promises for you into the future. Your enemies are going to run away from you. I will be an enemy to your enemy. I will be an adversary to your adversaries. I will make them run. I will be like bees sending before you to scatter them as you go. And it's not going to be that the whole land is going to be desolate. But as you grow, one nation will disappear, and another one will disappear, and another nation will disappear, and another city will disappear. And you will continue to grow and prosper as you go. But you must trust me. Now, our challenge for us today, if we could make a similarity as far as the gospel, is we are standing on the shores of a river of our own sins. We have the impossibility and the impassibility of the reality of my sin. And Christ is taking care of it and promised to continue that. But he has said, thou must trust me. You've got to trust me. And so the similarities that they have here is, I didn't put that first point up there. The similarity is the gospel preached, although definitely different. We have the shed blood of Christ. We have the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. But ultimately, it boils down to the same message. Will we trust God? Will we trust him? To them, you have seen what I've done to the Egyptians. To them, you've seen that I've taken you up as on eagle's wings. To them, God says, here's what you need to do. See, I've already done this for you. This is what you need to do. You need to continue to trust me. To them, God concludes with, for all the earth is mine, and I'm giving it to you. You'll trust me. To them, he says, that it's practically a step-by-step promise that if they obeyed, they could not and would not be stopped. To them, God quite literally names nation after nation, city after city, and says in essence that they will all be yours. To them, he says, if they accept what was said and did it, they would in essence enter into the rest that was talked about in verse 1. To them, it says God declares to them and us his love to them. To us, he expounds on that by showing us the very reality of the cross, the very reality of Christ. To us, he shows what was accomplished on the cross and reminds us that he will continue to work in us. To all, we are all left with no excuse. To all of us, not a single one of us can say, I didn't know. To all of us, we stand with the same similarity. The gospel has been preached. But as we continue on in verse 2, because the similarities really just stop right there. The gospel has been preached for all have heard. But the difference begins where, in the benefit that is gained. It says, for unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. Great similarities. This is what I've done. Just need to trust me. But the word preached did not profit them. There is no gain. There is no benefit. Based on Romans chapter 1 and many other passages, but I think we could honestly say that hell is going to be full of those who have heard, who do know, but who never realize their importance of their understanding, their obedience, their acceptance, their trust in the completed work of Christ. Hell is going to be full of those who have heard the gospel and unfortunately even, and I say this humbly, stood behind pulpits and shared the gospel. But they themselves never accepted the very reality of what that cross means. Never truly understood the benefit that is gained if they would simply trust. What is amazing about our God, however, is that, kind of as a side note, that there are men, and even women, I have to say that, who are sitting behind pulpits today, whose theology seems to be all upside down and backwards, who simply are missing out on the benefit gained of the gospel. Say it that way. And what is amazing about our God is that even in those circles, even in those mixes, that God is still able to do work in hearts. And I don't quite grasp it. I would like to be able to just declare that in so many circumstances, there's no good could ever come out of that. But somehow God does, and I'm not supporting. I think theology must be correct, and I think practicality of it also needs to be correct. But it's amazing that God is able to use people who seem to be backwards and upside down and flipped over 7 times, and yet still be able to accomplish the work because the challenge is the same. Again, the similarity, the gospel is preached. The question is, what am I going to do with it? Do I understand the benefit? Do I live out the benefit? Do I grasp that benefit that we have because of the cross, because of Christ, because of the gospel? For us, he's speaking to the children of God, the saved, both Jews and Gentiles, to us today, but obviously this is written to Jews, Hebrews. It says, unto us the gospel is preached, unto them the gospel is preached. Unto us we know the benefit, unto them they don't. And what a constant reminder that is to us today to be able to stand in the benefit of the gospel, to be able to claim the benefit of the gospel. And honestly, we are still going to sin, we are still going to fall, we are still going to find ourselves flat on our faces sometimes. Unfortunately, we'll find ourselves many times standing tall on a pedestal when we ought not to be standing tall on a pedestal. But by the grace of God, we are challenged by the blessing of the gospel message and even by the conviction of the Holy Spirit to go back to the Sunday morning message. And we know the benefit. We know the plus. You ever had a long-term power outage? And when I mean that, I don't mean just like 5 minutes, but it's been several hours, it's been a couple of days. This is what I've discovered in our long-term power outages that we've had. We've had so many here in Toulon. I don't understand the reasoning. But anyway, this will happen. Well, the power will go out, and in our house, our kids almost seem to enjoy that to a certain extent. It's kind of a new adventure. We could just leave the lights off all the time, but somehow that's different. But when the power's out, there's an adventure. The candles are lit. Suddenly, mealtime is just all that much more fun. What are we going to do? Our oven is gas, so our microwave is, our oven is electric, microwave is electric, so grill time. Sounds like fun here. We're going to figure out what we're going to make on grill. Let's have breakfast on the grill. So everything becomes an adventure, and even we'll go into the basement of all places. There's not even windows in our basement, but it doesn't matter when the power's up and it's dark out anyway. We sit in our basement at candlelight, and there's no TV. There's nothing that we can, but we just go about sitting in the basement, or we'll sit upstairs and look out the window in darkness with the flicker of the candle. But I don't know if it's just me, but I don't think it is. Have you ever done this? You sit in your house, no electricity, you got the candle lights, maybe some flashlights out, and maybe even doing some reading by flashlight. There's something cool about that as well, just reading a book, reading the Bible by flashlight, and just the extra adventure. But then, and I'm not trying to get too personal here, it's bathroom time. This is what I do. I'll walk through our dark living room, down our dark hallway, into our dark bedroom, and I walk into our dark bathroom, and what do? I turn on the light switch. I don't know why that every other room I know the electricity's off, but for whatever, it's just a bathroom for me. For whatever reason, it's the bathroom. And I'll walk into the bathroom and you hear that click. And then you realize in that instantaneous moment when you hear the click and the lights will come on, what did I do that for? There's no power in this house. Then you kind of have to walk back out, and I need the candle. You bring that in whatever it is. But anyway, why is it that we do that? And maybe you're in the case where every room you enter, you hit the lights. I don't know, but for me, it just seems to be the bathroom. I don't know why that is. It's just the bathroom. And the rest of the house is an enjoyment to have no power. The bathroom, it has to have power. I don't know what the deal is. But anyway, how many people, unfortunately, in fact, what is being said here, many of those ancient children of Israel, the ones who were just going through the motions. When I say just going through the motions, they were walking through a dark house expecting that when they hit the switch that the lights would come on even though they knew there was no power. And by going through the motions, then they responded exactly to what they saw as opposed to what they should have known. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them. And it's a contrast, meaning there's a benefit to us. There was a profit to us. There was a added value to us. But something that they lacked. You know, how often do we stand even on the shores of the river looking into the promised land? And our mind says, there's giants in that land. And our next response is, I should probably not go there. How often do we, much like them at times, face a circumstance in our life and we know what God has called us to do. We know that God has said, just trust me in this. I'm not just talking salvation here. I'm talking about just life here. We know that God has said, this is what you should do. And you need to trust me in this. But we look at what we would say the promised land, where God has us in store to go, and we look at where we are to go, even though God says, I'm going to go before you, and I'm going to wipe them out. All the earth is mine, and I'm giving it to you. But we get a report that there's very large men, very large muscles, and we say, no, that's not for us. That's exactly what they did. And what is being declared here in verse 2 is that because they refused to trust God, they heard the gospel preached, but they had no benefit because they refused to trust. For us in our salvation, there are many who are living around a life of understanding and knowing the gospel, but it's just the same as switching on a switch. There's no power there, but they go through the motions of it anyway. Week after week, going through the motions. On, the switch goes on, off, the switch goes off. Nothing changed in their life, nothing happened, but they're going through the motions week after week. Do we know the difference? Do we know the power? Do we know the benefit? Yes, there are times that we will be scared out of our minds about the giants that lay ahead of us. But do we know the power of the gospel? Do we know the power of what Christ has already done to us and for us? Similar to gospel preach, the difference is the benefit gained. It's implied, we have gained it. It's stated, they did not. They did not understand the benefit because they didn't have what they thought they had. But then as well, continuing on in verse 2, for unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them. In contrast, it profited us. But here's the reasoning, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Here's another difference. The faith needed to be added. Not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. Again, verses in Exodus make it pretty clear that God has some pretty great plans for the nation of Israel. You can't miss those plans in Exodus. In fact, it's hard for us, it's hard for me to read those verses in Exodus 19 and Exodus 23 that we already read, and say, how could you guys not figure this out? How could you, when God was so specific, even naming the cities and the nations involved, how could you not understand that what God said he would do? How can we not grasp that? But I have to admit, when you put it into my circumstances and name the cities and nations, so to speak, quote unquote, in my own life, I can see perhaps where there was fear. I can see where there was confusion. I can see where there was hesitation. But what makes a difference? Faith. Faith was that which made the difference. Faith is what makes the reality what God said, you will be unstoppable. It was faith that would have made them unstoppable. For us, it's the same thing. It's not just about the reality of knowing and being able to repeat the gospel, but it's that very reality of the faith being added to the gospel that says, yeah, because of the cross, it's already been paid. 12 spies, I'm going to break into tune here, but 12 spies went down to Canaan. And are bad, 2 are good. Those 10 came back and said, we can't do this. Those 10 came back and said, I know what God has said, but. Those 10 came back and said, let me give you the exact details here, things that God may have left out of the story. Here's how big the grapes are. Here's how big the men are. Here's how strong the cities are. Here's how fortified they will be. 12 spies went down to Canaan. 10 were bad. 2 are good. 10 said, we can't do it. 2 of them said, but God said. But God said that the whole earth was his. 2 out of the 12 came back and said, yes, that is true what they've said, but we have Almighty God on our side, and in essence, if God be for us, who can be against us? But the problem was that 12 spies went down to Canaan, and 10 were bad, and the 2 that were good were outnumbered by those that were bad, and the entire nation as a whole said, well, this makes sense. Let's not go. And it is to them that this verse is written, for unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, because they refused to mix in the addition of faith. Now, if I can make it similarity to a chocolate chip recipe on the back of the Toll House bag of chocolate chips, leaving out just that, was it a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half of salt makes a huge difference. But it can be easily overlooked. I'm not trying to equate or minimize faith to just a teaspoon, but ultimately it is something that is often overlooked. Because we know the gospel, we've heard the gospel, we've even repeated the gospel. We've seen people get saved because we've shared the gospel. But have we neglected that teaspoon of salt? Have we neglected that easily overlooked reality of faith? The reality that says of those 2 men, but God. But God. Yes, there is a great tragedy of sin. Yes, there is a great reality of hell. Yes, there is the very reality that I am a sinner before a holy God, and what can I do? It was 2 that said, out of 12, 2 out of 12 that said, but God. Because they mixed in the reality of faith. And interestingly enough, when they, after the 40 years of wandering, of those that were there originally, how many went back into the promised land? 2. Just 2 and all the offspring that didn't hear the gospel without faith. Just 2, plus those that weren't part of those that spoke the words that said, all we can respond to is what we see, and what we see is, we can't do this. 12 men went down to Canaan. Now, I feel like we're going to be PBS here in a moment. But 10 were bad, 2 were good. The difference was not what they heard. The difference wasn't because only the 2 had the inside scoop. The difference wasn't because only 2 of the 12 understood the reality of what was said. Like the words were confusing for the others, and only the 2 could comprehend it. The difference was that 2 of them said, not only have I heard it, not only do I understand it, I am adding in the reality of faith. And that made all the difference. Today, unfortunately, there are many, can I say spies? There are many spies in the land who fall under the numbers of 10. They've heard the same thing, but they've gained nothing from what they've heard. And the reason why they've gained nothing from what they've heard, the reason why they stand on the shores and only see giants instead of God, is because while they've heard truth, they've never added faith to that truth. And may we know truth, and may we know faith, and may we be able to understand again the white harvest fields around us that although many talk of God, not all have added in the often missing ingredient. It may be so significant as a teaspoon of salt, but you leave that out, and it has destroyed the whole thing. The similarity of gospel preaching. All of us in this room have heard the gospel preached. The difference is the benefit gained. Have we all understood the gain of the gospel in our lives? And I'm not just talking about the story. I'm not just talking about the event, but do we know that the benefit to our hearts, to our lives, to our marriages, to our homes, to our children and our grandchildren? Do we understand what it is that God has done for us? And we understand the benefit? And is it because, in fact, ultimately it is only because, we've added the faith. We've added the faith. Because, one last time, there were 12 guys, 12 dudes who all saw the same thing. But only 2 of them had faith added to it. The others came back and said, we can't. Where do we stand? For unto us was the gospel preached as well as unto them, but the word preached did not profit them, because it was not mixed with faith in them that heard it. And I think I was planning on going a little farther here and not just spending one verse in the morning service or just one verse in the afternoon service. But that one verse just reminded me again of the mission field that we have around us. There are so many people that talk of God, but they don't really know Him. There's so many people that know the gospel and can have even shared the gospel. They don't know the benefit of the gospel because they've never added the faith into it. And while they declare the gospel message and they know the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and they can share it with others, ultimately what happens every time in their life when they come to a crossing point, all they see is giants. Even though God has said, this is what I'm going to do for you, all they see is giants, and it's seen that in every aspect of their life. They come to the question marks where the rest of us would say, but God, they say, but that, can't do it. We have the faith mixed with the gospel. That makes all the difference. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you again for your word. We thank you for, Lord, we thank you for the gospel message, but I pray that it would be a reality to us, that it wouldn't just be going through the motions in our hearts and our lives, or we're turning on and off light switches that are doing nothing at the other end of the circuit. And I just pray that we would know the benefit because we've added the faith. And if there's somebody here that has gone through the motions of on and off of the switches and never understood the light, I pray that today would be that very reality. And as we consider the ministry that we all have for those around us, maybe those that we work with, those that maybe we live with, those that are in our family and extended families and those that are in our communities that may talk a lot about God, but they're absent of the power of the gospel message. I pray that we be able to be reminded of the missing ingredient. We be able to see their lives and be able to know what it is that is lacking. Be able to share with them the amazing reality of just adding the simple ingredient of faith and how it will transform their lives. I pray that you give us those opportunities even this week. In Jesus' name, amen. To close, just one verse. We have long for sweet peace and for faith to increase. And now earnestly, fervently pray. But you cannot have rest. What a great, we're going to see this in closing for all of Hebrews here for the next several chapters that we continue on with the topic of rest. But you cannot have rest or be perfectly blessed until you're all on the altar. Just like, let's stand as we sing 476.